This video will cover the Atlantic area of Miami Center. Each area has an initial common information area section at the beginning of the chapter, which talks about sector combinations, some altitude constraints, routing requirements, which will be further discussed in the next table, but includes the furthest waypoint that a controller of this area can clear aircraft direct to, and underlying terminal facilities. The routings in Table 2-1 onwards are important to appropriately route aircraft based off the restrictions depicted to aircraft landing internally and externally and transitioning through CMA airspace. Each chapter has routing tables, and they should be reviewed for common routes. Most routes over time will make sense and will not need to be particularly worried about on a daily basis. The next section in each chapter shows the combined and uncombined sectorizations for each area. The Atlantic area primarily splits to Sector 21 and Sector 2. This diagram will be the most important diagram on a typical basis, as the Atlantic area rarely is split up any further than its primary or secondary combined sectors. For that matter, almost no sector in CMA airspace is broken off except during limited event use cases and must be approved by ZMA staff. Next, the Freeport Low sector is depicted here, with the specific sectors combining to Freeport Low being highlighted. The Hobie sector is now depicted here. I'll cover each individual sector for the remainder of this video. In future videos, information about the common area information or sector diagrams will be left out and can be reviewed on your own time. Sector 1, Permit. Sector 1 exists in this airspace here with various shelves, primarily flight level 240 and above. Sector 1 works northbound traffic departing South Florida with overwater routing and transitions overflight traffic to and from the Caribbean and ocean areas over here. For the remainder of this video and all further videos, I'll only discuss about altitude directives, with the exception of automatic information transfers, which I'll come back to in a moment. So, in transitioning aircraft in Sector 1, Key West arrivals to Sector 40, going southbound, must be descended to flight level 320. Fort Myers TRACON arrivals to Sector 46, going westbound, must be descended at or below flight level 240 by the common boundary. Arrivals from Sector 1 to Nassau TRACON airspace must be descended at or below flight level 350 by the common boundary, descending to flight level 240. And lastly, Orlando TRACON arrivals destined for Sector 65 over here must be delivered at or below flight level 300. Now I'll briefly talk about automatic information transfers, which appear in certain sectors. Looking at Sector 1 and pulling up the ocean area and Caribbean area maps, Orlando arrivals via Hanks, for instance, cross Hanks at 13,000. This is not an instruction issued by Sector 1. Rather than having aircraft bound for Hanks transition to Sector 59 and then Sector 61 and have to make a communication switch twice, they can be handed off directly to 59, where if Sector 59 hands off the aircraft to Sector 61 and Sector 61 accepts the handoff, by the time the aircraft is at the 159 boundary over here, the aircraft communications can be directly transferred to 61. Various sectors in the Miami airspace have this procedure, and by implementing this procedure, it saves valuable frequency time and eliminates the need to contact a middle sector that may only work in aircraft for a matter of minutes. An additional piece of information that's useful to review per sector is the potential trouble spots. This highlights important information about potential trouble spots, which may occur more regularly for some sectors than others, depending on traffic flows that are observed. Additionally, each individual sector has sector-to-sector procedures at times or sector-specific directives. Moving on, we'll talk about Sector 02, Hobie. Sector 02 can be observed over here. Sector 2 primarily works southbound traffic to South Florida, such as on the coastal arrivals to Miami, Bonefish arrival to Miami, and Cuda arrival to Fort Lauderdale. Sector flows will make further sense when looking at the altitude table, but generally, there's a lot of overflight traffic too that follows the coast southbound. As explained previously, Sector 2 issues a lot of descents to flight level 240 or an OPD on arrivals that support it, and before handing off aircraft to the coastal area. In addition to the descents on most arrivals to the South Florida area, to Palm Beach Tracon and Miami Tracon, as well as arrivals to the Orlando Tracon via the Alina Star and Fort Myers Tracons via the Shifty Star. Sector 2 works initial descents to Nassau arrivals in the Abaco area, as well as Nassau terminal airspace arrivals. As observed, Sector 1 receives traffic from Sector 2 going this way, and Sector 18 receives traffic from Sector 2 going this way. Additionally, Sector 2 descends Homestead Tactical Turbojet aircraft to flight level 240 before handing off to Sector 20 in the coastal area. Sector 17 is an ultra-high sector that, for the most part, overlaps with Sector 02. They work a significant amount of overflight traffic and initiate the sequence of Sector 2 arrival aircraft into the South Florida area. Sector 17 does not have many altitude directives, but essentially, all traffic landing South Florida must be descended early to flight level 360 to provide adequate time for further descent from Sector 02. An interesting rule in Sector 17 airspace is traffic routed over Ursus west of Halby. Basically, if aircraft are west of Halby and flying over Ursus, regardless of where they are in the airspace, they should be transitioned to an odd altitude. Sector 18, ADOR, exists from surface to flight level 600 in the northeast portion of the Miami airspace. Primarily, it works northbound traffic from South Florida and additional southbound traffic transitioning to the Caribbean and ocean areas. There's not many notable things about Sector 18, but any traffic for both Sectors 18 and 19 transitioning to the Caribbean or ocean areas must be delivered at even altitudes at all times, even if they're going southeastbound. Sector 19, Newcar, similarly works traffic that you would expect in Sector 18 airspace, with an emphasis on overflights from Jacksonville towards the Caribbean and ocean areas, and vice versa. Notably, there's limited frequency coverage at or below flight level 230 in the northeast corner of this airspace. In accordance with the ZMA ZJX LOA, traffic transitioning southbound or northbound must be told to monitor Miami Center until CARPEX and then contact Jacksonville Center. Jacksonville Center implements similar procedures for aircraft transitioning southbound, and this is simulated, so there may be limited or difficulty understanding aircraft in this airspace at low altitudes. The last sector in the Atlantic area is Sector 21, which really lies at the heart of the airspace. Sector 21 initiates the sequence of traffic departing South Florida area filed via the Atlantic and Caribbean routes, and is also responsible for the separation of traffic landing Freeport approach airspace. On the Cuda and Bonefish arrivals, Sector 21 works traffic from the east over Freeport and issues an initial descent prior to them being merged into the flow with coastal traffic on the western side of its airspace. Additionally, traffic landing Palm Beach approach airspace, including Stewart, Fort Pierce, and Vero Beach, must be descended before handing off to Sector 20. Gabo departures out of the Miami Tracon must be climbed no higher than 13,000 feet, and Freeport turboprop departures must be left at or below 10,000 feet. With this sector covered, the Atlantic area should be fully understood now. While that might be an overstatement, it's not terribly complicated, as traffic mostly flows southbound along the coast with some overflights, and traffic moves northeastbound through Sector 21, 1, 18, with overflights going north and southbound in Sector 19. The remainder of the videos in this series will cover each additional area in the Miami Center airspace in further detail.